Let's go. Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm doing really well. How are you this season?
This season is going very fast.
Oh,
Lots of predictions coming out for 2020. Lots of things on the writing list that I have to do, presentation that I'm working on for the Middle East. So things are going pretty quick.
fantastic, fantastic. I was a fan of yours since some time ago when we first met, and I was following your blog. Okay, it's always very informative, very insightful. So, what I wanted to talk about today, because this will be series of what we call SaugaTalks. Okay, I
Okay.
hope we're gonna get some interesting content to discuss. I hope we're gonna get topics that will draw people's interest. So the blog I want to focus on in particular, because Jim, you've been a prolific author and an influential persona in business and technical world. So for me, the greatest interest is when you pick up the trends and when you discuss them, to some extent, but always summarizing in your net, meaning that, hey, there are conclusions from, right, what I just discovered.
Right.
So what I wanted to talk to you about is how are you uncovering those trends first? Because
Huh.
it's a lot of, right, probably data sources, information that we're all kind of, right, reading and going through, but what is it that makes some of them important for you than others?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to be an avid reader, which I am. I'm very interested in business trends, so I read Austin Kiplinger, Forbes, Fortune, and I sample business articles that come my way that are either pushed or seem of interest. So I try to stay on the business scene to some degree. I came from the financial sector, so I like to keep in touch with the financial sector because it's something that I understand and I can get my arms around. So I have a specialty there. On the technical side, of course, I have experience, and I work for some what I would say aggressive users of technology. They were using AI 30 years ago, or more actually, and they're in production today with AI technology. So I was lucky enough to work on projects around that. So the personal experiences there, working with processes, working with workbenches that were aimed at employees or customers. And then of course there's a network. I have a network of people that I talk to quite frequently. I have a network of that's a data person. I have another one that's a decision person, and we try to talk and catch up from time to time. And then of course I've authored some books, and I talk to some of the co-authors. So the network is a key piece. And of course, I'm out on Twitter, I'm out on LinkedIn, I'm looking at things that pique interest. And the key is, how do you summarize, a year or a decade or a pattern into top five, which is always a challenge. So I make myself a candidate list of, I'd say maybe 20
Okay.
trends that I've picked up. And I figure out which five are going to be hitting soon. In other words, of these 20, which five can be presented. So, I say it's the top five, but they're my top five. Obviously, other
Exactly.
people
That's
have.
what makes them interesting because exactly you prioritize them. And if I may start on those, right, that you kind of highlighted for this year, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you talk about anticipation. Okay, that's fantastic because again, I'm reading business technology materials here and there, right? But this is such a great aggregation of many trends that I'm sure you use anticipation as umbrella, right? Can you please
Yeah,
expand?
it
Yeah, what
is.
do you mean by anticipation as a trend?
Well, we used to be pretty successful as businesses, looking through the rear view mirror and maybe projecting the future a little bit, by looking at past behaviors. And, that's still a viable source. But the really savvy organizations are trying to The real long-range planners are trying to plan scenarios, and they try to anticipate what some of the opportunities are, what some of the threats are, and they try to backfill those threats and opportunities of their interest back to triggers that they see either in the marketplace, in their customer base. So the idea, and let me give you a real world example.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for an insurance company, and insurance companies are, if you think about it, they're gamblers. And this was a life insurance company at that time, and they, of course, had other products, and they've blossomed and become a financial network now. But back then, they were betting that you were going to live, and you, as the insured, are betting you're going to die. And of course, you're going to win the bet eventually. But the question is, when can the company make the most money? And they're going to, try to make money while they can. And they want to look at all the scenarios that could affect them. So they'd look at hyperinflation, hyperdisinflation. They'd look at what happens if we have an outbreak of a disease in a particular geography. How's that going to affect us? And they went through and they did a lot of planning. They did a lot of simulation and came up with scenarios and gave them all probabilities. And they would go back and look at certain signals that they thought would say, hey, well, you really need to pay attention to this. So anticipation from a paranoid betting company, which an insurance company is, they have to be paranoid because they have to have reserves. They have to, actually give a rate of return for their customers unless they're a term life insurance. And so because of that, they were able to come up with about 120 different scenarios that they looked for. And they caused the programmers, and I was a programmer for that organization, to actually build code in to look for signals. And that's pretty rude and crude, but take a look at the kinds of algorithms that we have now besides, just simulation, Monte Carlo simulation. We have other kinds of algorithms. We have AI outposts that are on the edge that can see things happening early. By the time our programs picked up the signals, it was kind of late in today's world. The business world is in a lot of flux today, and business people want to be flexible. They want to turn on a dime if they have to. They want to be able to respond. So you're going to see more listening posts on the edge. If it happens to be, what's happening on, my mobile interactions with my customers, that's on the edge. If you're linked with an Industry 4.0 IoT environment, you're going to sense certain kinds of things that are happening on the edge. So we're seeing the analytics getting pushed out on the edge. We're seeing intelligence get pushed out on the edge. And we're seeing companies being much more proactive in some of their planning abilities. But there's always black swans. And so companies have to respond to black swans that come up. So this idea of anticipation is becoming, not just projecting the past, it's taking a guess for the future and looking at the ones that are either most opportunistic or most threatening, depending on whether you're paranoid or not. Life insurance companies are generally paranoid, so they have to be.
And here's the question, I'm sure for business and technology audiences, right, or professionals, anticipation may mean slightly different things.
Oh, absolutely. When it comes to anticipation on the business side, it's what kind of business conditions, what kinds of competitive environments, what kind of customer behaviors. So for instance, we see the millennials behaving a lot different than my generation. We see, the notion of, depending upon the economy, how the customer behaves. Right now, the economy's steaming along. People are spending freely. You can get them on some upside things. They're going to buy some luxury items where they wouldn't have before. So understanding those conditions from a business perspective is one thing. And then from a technical perspective, it's a different game. The game at the technical level is to be able to respond to change. So, you may be doing a volatility analysis. So you may be looking at some of your legacy code and say, well, which part of the code changes the most? Should we put in some explicit rules? Should we surround some of our legacy so that we can leverage it better for our customer experience and customer excellence? Those are, the IT and the technology-driven anticipations things are more reactive in fashion, but also there could be, people that are in between IT and business that are looking and mining it, data. So for instance, data mining, process discovery, process optimization, all of those things, sometimes the tech guys are finding it and pointing it out to the business. So there's no simple answer, and it's how well you communicate between business and IT. And I think the digital technologies causes that communication to be a little crisper and more frequent.
Mm-hmm. And do you see change being driven by combined wisdom of the company, or is it more business pushing technology, or depends, right? I know there's no easy answer, but how do you see it developing in 2020?
Well, I think there are certain trends. So for instance, I think that the customer excellence, which I would define differently than customer experience. Customer experience says, how well do we treat the customers with our transactions?
Okay.
It's, starts at my company, ends at my company. I think that's kind of narrow. And I think you're going to see organizations say, well, what's the overall journey of the customer and what role do we play there? And how do we handle it? And so I think a lot of these things are going to be driven through external
pressure,
forces.
Right? Yeah.
Question is, are you paying attention? And are you paying attention in the right channel at the right time? Or are you just, bringing in customers who love you and you ask them questions that are easy, or do you create surveys that help you get a raise and really don't get at the issues? And
right, but do you include unpleasant questions, because you kind of know your business well, but also you want to hear the real feedback, right? Not always, shiny, rainbowy sort of.
Well, right? If you look at surveys, every survey that I've taken recently doesn't really allow me as a customer to do anything other than answer the question so that they look better, so they get a bonus. I mean, almost every survey I take is that way. If you put something in the remarks, you think you've said something, it makes you feel good, but they very rarely respond to that, to be honest with you.
Yep. So will digital help with this? I mean, how?
Well, with natural language processing, certainly. I mean, and understanding. I think we're going to see the combination of knowledge and NLP come together, so that you're extracting knowledge that might cause you to make a change or might help the next person that has to deal with it. So I'm seeing case studies of NLP looking at content, whether that content be paper, whether that content be, voice, or whether that content be video, or whether it be a training video. And it's learning from that and giving people advice by showing them the right video at the right time. I'm working on this particular pump. And I let somebody know I'm working on the pump, and they can say, hey, well, look, we've got a training video on this, and we've learned this from watching the other technicians, the senior technicians, work on these kind of pumps before. And, here are the easy trip ups on these pumps. So, I mean, we're starting to see that combination of knowledge applied just in time to help not only employees, but help customers. Though I have to say most of the chatbots that I work with are kind of rudimentary and aren't there. I think you're going to see some more sophistication instead of a chatbot that says, how can I sell you? How can I sell you? How can I sell you? I mean, it's thinly veiled selling.
A little bit more of value, right? Something
more value to me as a customer or as an employee. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, The old world was you used the journeyman approach. You'd have some master and some junior guy, and the junior guy is polishing the boots of the senior person and trying to learn. This is going to get bypassed by observation and NLP and video understanding, and I think it's going to be a richer employee experience and a richer customer experience. And we'll be able to shorten the time that it takes to become a master. And the masters are going to have to move. They better get better too.
What you brought, it's such an important point, because this gives data and evidence in the hand of anyone who is skillful with getting data and evidence, which will be any bright employee, right? Any college grad, anyone pretty much who is interested enough and passionate enough, right? So bringing this evidence and saying, we're doing this for such and such reason, right? Because we always done this, right? But guess what, right? Why don't we look in such and such? So all I'm saying, this is like democratizing in a lot of ways, right? Knowledge, wisdom. And I guess, 20 years of experience will not mean much. It doesn't mean anything anymore, right? It's those who really can bring the data and really, right, find the ways to improve the performance based on, right, something tangible.
Yeah, the knowledge gaps are going to disappear. I mean, we know knowledge management had a fantastic public failure back in the 90s and early 2000s. I think it's got a chance now because now we have learning technology. We now have data capture technology that can work. So, the old knowledge management was based on a taxonomy that some genius in the background was building. And if you came up with a new relationship, that genius had to approve it and take it in front of board. Well, now we have ontologies that dynamically create, relationships, say, well, this is related to this is related to this. And you can start looking at the patterns, and you're not held back by the data structure. You're not held back by the language, even if it's, multilingual. Kind of the old things for building knowledge management didn't work, and that's why it failed. It was a technology fail, and it was an administrative procedure fail. Now we have all of the pieces are in place to make it happen, and we're starting to see it happen.
And guess what? I don't know if you're seeing any challenges in terms of organizational cultures, okay? Because this is completely different world, right? And yet, to transform organization in a way that you have the forum, you have this channel for all this knowledge to propagate and being actually implemented, okay? I know it's happening. I know, of course, those who are cloud born, those who are newer company, they do it intuitively, right? But so many others just don't. And how do you see this kind of, this knowledge reflects in the digital practice? How do you call this whole discipline?
Yeah, I think there's going to have to be a culture change. It used to be that people put their corporate models and they carved it in stone.
Yeah.
And if it's pleasing the customer, that's not a good one, not a bad one to put in stone. But the idea that we've always done it that way. This is the way we do things.
Yeah.
Middle management still is the gatekeeper of good and bad news, depending upon the behavior of the leader. There's some leaders that we see today that hate bad news. It's all over.
It's only human, Jim. You and I, right? We would love to have good news all day long, right?
Exactly.
It's only
middle managers are the gatekeepers, and they want to keep their jobs. So they're not going to want a lot of change. So I think the middle manager is going to have to change, I think, the most. I think the executives want to please customers. I think they know that becomes, is going to be better results. They're savvy enough to realize that they're only a piece of the customer journey. Their company is a piece of it. Their company is not going to be able to handle every need. So, for instance, financial planning. There's a great example. All of us have to do it now. Companies no longer give us retirement funds. The government may not be there with, security kinds of retirements. So we're on our own, right?
Yep.
So every company thinks they're the only one that sells you something, right? Well, that ain't the case. I mean, we have a lot of sophisticated people that are investing now that are, and they have investment brokers that help them, but their journey goes across multiple companies, across multiple investment types, across different cycles for the age. So an old guy like me doesn't want to take as many risks as maybe some young person like my son. I mean, he's always telling me all these hot tech companies and hot young companies, and he's made a lot of money off of a couple, but ask him about the ones he lost on. I don't want any losers at my age. So you see the notion of being able to adapt and change and look at it from the customer's viewpoint, not just the company's viewpoint. Companies right now are after optimizing their results. They're going to have to move towards a balance of optimizing organizational results with customer results. And customer goals are just as important as organizational ones. The idea of take it or leave it really appeals to millennials. They'll leave you. If you say take it or leave it, they'll leave you.
Oh yeah. I mean, we as a business community, technology community, understood it last 5 years, I would say, right? But still, it's in a lot of ways it's wishful thinking. In a lot of ways, I'm going to bring you to the topic, Jim. I wanted to discuss what about existing legacy life, okay? Because every company, right, we understand it well, they run business, they have customers for decades sometimes, right? You have to keep your ship floating, okay? And all the digital promise. And we know you mentioning executive tasted the benefits. It's like apparent now for so many, right? At the same time, day and night, I'm thinking, how do I keep my mission critical projects and processes on, right? Yeah. Can you elaborate what's going to happen in 2020? Because it's not going to go away.
The dirty L word is always there. It is, legacy is something that you have to deal with. So the question is, are you going to, have 80% of your budget for, managing legacy, and giving you maybe 20% to play with, 10% of it will be productive?
Maybe less, maybe less, maybe
maybe less. I mean, some organizations, that's the case. Yeah. So I think you have to incent people to want to do something different. So you have to give them goals to take risks, number one. That's how you change the culture. And two, you maybe reduce the amount that they have for maintenance, which forces them to think differently, think out of the box. And there's a couple of ways of dealing with legacy. One is what I would say, kind of a hands-off approach to legacy, where you don't go in and change it. I mean, it might even be in a language that you don't have any skills for. Okay. In that case, you're going to wrap it. You're going to put it in a different customer journey, a different process flow, and you're going to wrap it and leverage it. And it may be in a large chunk, it may be in a small chunk, maybe two different chunks. And and I've got some blog posts on that, where it's what I call a non-invasive way of dealing with legacy. Well, then there are other ways of dealing with legacy where you do minor surgery. It's what I would call outpatient surgery. You look at your legacy, and by the way, most of the wrapping is for a better experience. I mean, if you think about it, or it's tying things together that were separate. And so you see a lot of RPA aimed at that. And then the minor surgery ones, this is a suggestion that I've seen work over and over again, is look for your hot spots to change. Where are you getting change in your existing portfolio? Where are you likely to get change in your existing portfolio? Isolate that part and put in explicit rules. So in other words, make the rules tunable from outside the program. And we're finding that that's very important. The other thing is you can link that up with decisioning kinds of technologies, model decisions, and see what the decision models will take into account, and what part of the programs have to change if a decision goes one way versus another. And in that case, it's not just a heat map of change, it's an anticipation of where you could change if a decision all of a sudden went another direction. So we bring that anticipation back in. You can be reactive or proactive with your heat maps.
Beautiful. Hi. Let's talk about automation here, because in some ways, right, to free up your people, you might want to give them a hand, right, with some mundane tasks, right? Is this a way? So that they can focus on a little bit more interesting and, hey, forward-looking projects.
Exactly. I mean, we hire these, college graduates or the best people we can find. HR spends all this effort to find the best possible people, and then what do we have them do? Dumb stuff.
Not much. Not much. I was part of hiring team, okay, and I was getting the brightest, wonderful graduates from top universities, okay, so eager, so open, all right, to learn, but at the same time to contribute in an active way. Again, I can talk about it on and on, right, how college kids used to be a little more obedient than they are now, because in a way, right, I mean, this whole culture promotes, thank goodness, openness and creativity, and they've been studying hard for a long time, right, to leave their footprint in the world, right? Yeah. So when we put them through very mundane processes with the kind of, necessary tasks, guess what happens, right? They lose the fire, they lose the interest, and you get employees who just complacent.
Yeah,
right?
and there's three kinds of work. There's go play work, go work, and go to hell work. And that last category is that mundane stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons that RPA is so high, as you're taking mundane tasks, linking multiple systems together to create one view, going and looking up data, going up on a web and making things happen. And as these bots, do the more work, those bots, all of a sudden become your friend. What if you were aware of the work that they're doing? And as these bots get smarter, and we're going to see RPA combined with process mining, combined with process, combined with AI. Some people say RPA is the gateway drug to AI. I think in some ways, yes. I mean, because who's going to buy automation projects?
Hey.
Those CPAs. Hey, you saved me money. I love you, buddy.
Okay. Okay, that's wonderful. We all love saving, right? But we know that too much saving is not causing you any growth, right? It doesn't let you develop.
Exactly. So yeah, you have to guide that balance between saving money and automating and the customer experience, which we elaborated on in the past 15 minutes.
Yep.
So how do you find that balance? And certainly, these automation projects are going to get money. So let's be smart and take some of the money that we're getting from these projects, put it in a fund that we can use for experimentation, that we can use to take away rotten work, so our lovely people can bloom, and their creative ideas can be used to anticipate. So I really think that if the really savvy companies have figured out how to take some of those savings and use it as an investment fund.
Investment, including in your employees, okay? And these are not, very high investment. It's mostly investment of time and interest, right? Because what I've seen, Jim, is that when young hires, right, when they bring new platforms to workplace, I kid you not, okay? Slack came to existence in the project I was on because somebody just started using Slack, okay? You don't need any approvals anymore. You kind of write your own boss, and that's what's driving this entire economy, I think, okay?
Yeah, and frankly, the next generation is more collaborative. And
Exactly.
so, our generation is you had to know the answers, you had to be the master and work
Exactly.
really
Learn
fast.
from the best in my team, right? They will teach you.
Yeah, exactly.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's
now they collaborate to solve problems. I mean,
exactly.
economically, they had to do that. If you live on either coast, are you as a single person going to live in your own apartment that you can't afford? No,
Not so much. I know what you're
no, you're going
talking
to
about. I
collaborate.
know.
And
I
so,
know. I know.
and they're bringing in collaboration. So that's a
Totally.
huge change, and that's why a Slack would come in. That's why other, Microsoft Teams, all of these collaboration capabilities are there, and I think that's exciting. And that's the reason why I haven't retired. Is there's so many people that want to learn and want to collaborate, that we can take businesses to a new level. We can leverage technologies in ways we haven't been able to before. It's actually pretty exciting because we've got a perfect storm here of emerging
Mhm.
technologies that are usable, people that want to use them, people that want to work as a team to make it happen. All we got to do is get middle management and accountants out of the way.
Exactly. And entry, what is it? Entry barrier is so low now. I don't know what you see, Jim, but I experience it just matter of what few weeks of person spending time and getting hands-on on practically anything. Okay. I would love to ask you more and more details in our future talks about all the cloud services. Okay. Because it used to be you have to be part of enterprise, like big team who would afford that kind of software, right? Long time ago on-prem with all the licensing and that, right? And now practically anyone can start anything.
That's
Okay,
true. That's
that's
true.
also consequences of digital, right?
Yeah.
So I would love to tap on this, of course, on your knowledge, because to me it's mesmerizing. It's
Yeah,
mesmerizing.
I think we can make things happen inside of companies as well. But one of the biggest barriers in my mind
Mm-hmm.
is the stovepipes that we've created around specialties. So
Okay.
you have Department A does work, passes it on to B, passes it on
Okay.
to C,
Oh
and they
yeah.
don't look at and by the way, they all have different goals because they have different managers. Now
Okay.
maybe at the top the goals come together, but we've got to find a way of breaking down these stovepipes and cooperate more. So this collaboration's got to go across departmental lines. And the reason these departmental lines exist is because of specialties. We have these very specialized people that work in Department A, the
Mm-hmm.
underwriters, and we have the accountants, and we have the people that do payout. We have different people do different things. When we get these smart bots and we get AI, my goodness, you could have somebody handle all the work because you don't have to be an expert. And so now you can actually handle something end to end
Mm-hmm.
instead of having to pass work off. So, I mean, we can make the pass offs better. We can make it more collaborative, and that's going to happen. But someday I see, maybe not so much these specialty knowledges, but people that have great EQ, not IQ.
EQ. I know
Yeah.
emotional.
So, you get
Emotional.
along with
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
and you can bring together the things that are necessary to get the customer's goals and the company's goals at the same time and get guidance by some of these bots and agents, smart agents. And then
Exactly.
some of them are software.
Yeah, that silos, I mean, that you're describing, okay, interesting enough, we inherited it from very industrial, I would say, era, okay,
Yeah.
when everybody was looking to get the very narrow specialty, right, to be able to be very proficient and effective as part of conveyor line, which at the time was innovation, absolutely, but 100 years kind of passed, right? So everyone caught on the idea how I become part of that conveyor, part of that enterprise, where I'm getting my task and handing it off to next department. Okay, this is all nice, right? But except that it doesn't work. It doesn't work
Yeah,
completely.
it doesn't work in the long term
Yep,
now
yep, yep.
anymore. And you can have bots do the simple stuff in somebody else's silo. So why not have that happen?
Exactly. And they don't ask what department I'm in, right? They're taking the task and they just see all the resources available with all the data sources, right? to kind of digest information and take action. Okay, so it's completely different picture. And again, many companies still in very way conservative, right? And yeah, it has to change.
Yeah, and then there's some specialties will always be there. In an insurance company, the actuaries are the actuaries. There's
Okay,
probably nobody that's going to take their place, but you know, we have to break down the walls for our customers and our employees.
here we go, here we go. And you also pointed out, Jim, you know, aggregation of technologies. Will it help? Because it looks like we're talking right down this line now.
Yeah, what we're seeing is people in the past 2 years have used technologies, and there's probably 30 new digital technologies in the last 5 years,
Exactly.
and we've used this one here and that one there and
Mm-hmm.
that one here, and we're starting to see some pairing. So now there's an aggregation of, you know, natural pairs, but also at the same time we're seeing an aggregation that's a higher level than that,
Mm-hmm.
that are more functionally oriented instead of a technology oriented. They have, you know, some process in them, some intelligence in them, some integration in them, some device management in them. And these things are called digital business platforms. And we're starting to see them emerge. So it might be, you know, maybe there's a digital business platform for making decisions.
Okay.
So these might be called, decision spots. There are other ones that are really good, let's say, at collaboration. So these might be collaboration digital platforms, or some that are good at operational transactions, some that are really good at secure cloud. These things will start converging together. Will you have one someday that everybody operates under? I don't think so. Just like there's, we see multi-cloud solutions and hybrid cloud solutions. We're going to see hybrid digital business platforms. Some are going to be very, data-centric, some more decision-centric, some more intelligence-centric, some more business transaction-centric. And you might have 3 or 4 that kind of converge together. We see, like a Salesforce is an example of a digital business platform from a business transaction perspective. We see companies like Google, which are, they haven't integrated their technologies very well, but they're starting to get them to work in pairs so that you have a useful capability. And that might be maybe a cloud platform, or IBM and security. They're bringing IBM security and intelligence together as a digital platform. So this aggregation of technologies is happening naturally, because in order to continue to get benefits from these individual on-ramps to digital, you got to start combining them. You got to start shifting lanes. You got to use the whole road, not just the on-ramp. And so we're starting to see that happening. I've written some blog posts on digital business platforms way back in 2015. Written some on, pairs, productive pairs, and productive, triplets that work well together that I wrote this spring. So this aggregation's happening. The thing is to get ahead of it and figure out which ones you want. Otherwise, you're going to be reacting. It'll be knee-jerk. And then we get into this, how do I anticipate? So you want to get in front of this to make sure that you're picking the right digital business platform, so you don't, because they're big investments. I mean, when you combine multiple technologies, they'll become a bigger investment, and some vendor's going to try to control you. So get ahead of it.
That's an excellent, yeah, this is excellent point. Very, applied, so to speak, discussion. Okay, because one thing is what's your intention, another thing, right? How do I get there? So, Jim, what I would love to do in the next few weeks to expand on digital platform aspects, okay, and all the elements, because I'm sure there's more knowledge you can share on each of them. Okay, so for our audience here, they might benefit from you expanding on the topic and raising questions. Okay, how about that?
Sounds like fun to me.
So
Any kind of
absolutely.
topic we can have some banter on is good, I think.
Absolutely. So let's talk about AI, how it's going to help business, technology, customers, right? Let's talk about processes, RPA. Let's get into data in a little more, let's say, like deeper way. Okay. So let's invite our audiences, okay, for upcoming talks here. We'll be sharing them through social media, through all the channels we have, right? And Jim, thank you so much for today's talk. I mean, it was very informative for me, very helpful. So thank you.
Oh, it was fun for me too. And if I can help somebody in any way, that's why I live.
That's why we're starting these conversations, exactly, to know the areas where people need help and help. That's right.
Okay, very good. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, talk to you
Bye-bye.
soon. Thank you. Bye.